When a vehicle has 200,000 miles on it, most people are trying to get rid of that vehicle. Those are exactly the kind of vehicles I want to buy. So let's take this $500 car, spend $1,000 in parts, and make it highly reliable. There's a reason why my friend was able to purchase this car for $500. When making sharp turns, a whole lot of noise is coming from both sides of the front end. This is going to take some time and money to repair. The front bumper skin is loose on both sides of the vehicle, and the headlights are in really bad shape. The scaling over the headlights is definitely blocking quite a bit of light. The chrome coating has delaminated from the hubcaps. This car is looking pretty rough. The good news is that the paint is still in pretty good condition. The front windshield does have a crack that needs repaired. The check engine light is illuminated, so let's see what's going on with the engine. The onboard diagnostics port is located under the kick panel near the center console. I'll be putting together a review on budget code scanners very soon. It looks like there are two trouble codes. There's one for the engine and one for the transmission. And the engine code is P0128. The coolant temperature has been too low, indicating a bad thermostat. It could be a coolant sensor that's malfunctioning, but I doubt the thermostat has ever been replaced. The trouble code for the automatic transmission is P0847, so we'll have to replace the third clutch pressure switch. So this vehicle has great potential for being highly reliable and a pretty decent looking 200,000 mile car. The front brakes were recently replaced, so let's leave those alone. And the front tire looks fairly even, and it's time to rotate the tires to the back of the vehicle. So let's get started working at the front of this vehicle first. I'll detach the ABS wire and the brake line from the strut. I'm really curious about how badly the axles are worn. The windshield wiper arm is out of the way, so we can access the three nuts at the top of the strut. Now that the plastic trim is out of the way, there's plenty of space to access the three nuts. Now that the three nuts have been removed, just a couple more bolts and the strut is coming off. As Cousin Eddie says, liquid wrench smells bad but works good. And both bolts were more than tight enough. That clunking noise is more than likely coming from the strut assembly. And removing the strut takes about 15 minutes. While the strut is out, let's go ahead and replace the drive axles. And the axle nut did come off a lot easier than expected, and the drive axle has already shifted inward without having to apply force. Since the strut is out of the way, the axle shaft will slide out of the hub with plenty of room to spare. And the CV boot is out of place, and the CV joint is definitely worn out. The end of the pry bar between the transmission and the drive axle popped right out. And the outer CV joint is in really bad shape. Definitely glad we're changing this one out. Since the process is the same, I'll go ahead and replace the drive axle and the strut on the passenger side of the vehicle off camera. I'll apply some lubricant where the shaft makes contact with the transmission seal. And the spline for the new CV axle lined up without a problem, and the drive axle is fully seated in the transmission. And the spline on the CV slid right into the axle hub pretty easily, and the axle nut is in place. I'll install the two bolts at the bottom of the strut for now and won't tighten the nut just yet. I'll use the floor jack to lift the control arm and the strut. Everything is lined up and the strut is in place. All three nuts are tight, and I'll go ahead and reinstall both pieces of plastic trim. And the axle nut is tight enough for now. Once the vehicle is back on the ground, I'll torque the axle nut to the proper torque spec using the torque wrench. The ABS sensor and the brake line are fastened to the strut. I'm told that the front brakes were recently serviced, but the back brakes are pretty much used up. Let's lift the back wheel off the ground, place a jack stand under the vehicle, and then remove the back tire. Fortunately, the brake drum isn't stuck. A little back and forth on each side of the brake drum, and it's off. With the collection container below, I'll spray down everything with brake parts cleaner to avoid airborne brake dust. I'd better take some pictures just in case I forget how everything goes back together. I could use some diagonal cutters to really bite into the springs for easy removal, but diagonal cutters are likely to cause a little bit of damage to the spring. There is a special removal tool for brake springs, or you can just use needle nose pliers. Before closing the pliers, I'll compress the spring. Now that the spring is compressed, I'll grip the pin with the pliers and rotate the pin 90 degrees. The pin and the clip are in great shape, so let's move on to the other side. I'll compress the clip spring, grip the pin, and then turn 90 degrees, and the pin and clip look good. I'll pull outward on the brake shoes at the bottom. This will allow the shoes to move closer together to release tension on the bottom spring. And the spring is in great shape. I'd rather not use the diagonal cutters on the top spring. So I'll lift both shoes away from the wheel cylinder, which will release the tension on the top spring for easy removal. I'll go ahead and remove the top spring and the adjuster. I'll go ahead and remove the parking brake lever from the cable instead of trying to capture this on video while everything is suspended in the air. There's a special type of pliers designed for removing this horse clip, or a regular pair of pliers will also do the job. A couple of gentle taps and the horseshoe clip is off. I'll go ahead and remove the washer and dowel pin. Comparing the old brakes to the new brakes, the shoes are just about worn out. I'll go ahead and transfer the hardware over to the new brake shoe. Installing the horseshoe clip with pliers is easier than removing it, and the horseshoe clip is secured in place. I'll apply some silicone grease that's designed for brake parts onto the backing plate where the brake shoes ride. I'll reinstall the parking brake lever onto the brake cable. I'll start reinstalling the brake hardware, beginning with the pin and spring clip. I'll compress the spring, grip and then twist the pin, and the brake shoe is secure. I'll apply some brake parts lubricant on all the moving parts on the brake adjuster. I'll position the brake shoe on the wheel cylinder and then position the brake shoe for easy installation of the top spring. The adjuster screw and hardware is all in place. and the hold down pin and clip are secured in place. The spring that pulls the bottom of the shoes together is also in place, and the final spring is pretty easy to stretch to install. The new brake drum fits nicely, but the brakes do need to be tightened. I'll use a flat screwdriver to rotate the adjuster. The brake shoes are barely coming into contact with the drum, so we're all finished. New brake fluid should be at 1% or less water content. So let's check out the moisture content using a moisture meter. And the meter is maxed out at over 4% water content, and this definitely needs changed out. You could use a turkey baster, but a fluid extractor can reach into areas not accessible by a turkey baster. This fluid extractor only took about 10 minutes to build, and I'll show you how to build one later in the video. The brake fluid is very dark. I just filled the master cylinder reservoir. Let's put the fluid extractor to use on changing out the brake fluid, beginning with the drum brakes at the rear of the vehicle first. Instead of using a fluid extractor, another option is to use a one-person brake bleeding kit. The dust cap is off of the bleeder valve and the extractor hose is connected. A fraction of a turn is plenty, so let's power up the extractor and slowly extract the old fluid. I'll tighten the bleeder valve occasionally, and then we'll check the brake fluid at the reservoir to avoid running out of brake fluid. And the fluid extractor is now pulling out new brake fluid. So we're all finished with this corner of the vehicle. I'll close the bleeder valve and replace the dust cap. While we're already back here, let's go ahead and change out the rear shock absorber. The 3 plastic buttons holding the fabric liner in place have been removed, and the fabric liner will just lay over. I'll remove the nut that holds the shock absorber in place, as well as the washer and bushing. An impact wrench makes very quick work of the lower shock absorber bolt, and the shock absorber is off. And this shock absorber is definitely worn out and needs to be replaced. Now that the new shock absorber is in place, I'll install the lower bolt first to make it easy to line up the hole for the bolt. And the top nut is in place and tightened. The fabric lining is back in place and we're all finished with the shock. Let's go ahead and replace the thermostat next. The engine is nice and cool, so it's safe to remove the radiator cap. Before we drain the radiator, let's take a sample and measure the quality of the antifreeze. And the antifreeze actually doesn't look too bad, but let's measure the pH and the concentration level using a test kit. My color vision just isn't the best, but the glycol appears to be around 60%, which is pretty good. And the pH appears to be very close to 9, which is also good. So the coolant is still in good shape, but we'll replace the coolant that we drain out of the system anyway. And the petcock valve is very easy to access, and the antifreeze is draining into the container. While the radiator is draining, I'll go ahead and use the fluid extractor to clean out the overflow tank. It's not necessary to remove the radiator hose, but I'll do it anyway to allow for a better view of the thermostat assembly. I'll go ahead and remove the 2 bolts holding the bracket for the oxygen sensor wires. Only 2 bolts need to be removed to gain access to the old thermostat. And the 2 screws are out, so I'll go ahead and use a long screwdriver to gently break the seal. And the old thermostat is out, and the thermostat is oriented with the jiggle valve on top. This valve really comes in handy for purging air from the cooling system. A genuine Honda thermostat wasn't too much more than the aftermarket. The thermostat came with a new rubber gasket, and there's a carve out for the jiggle valve. The new thermostat and gasket fit properly. I'll gradually tighten each side of the thermostat just to make sure that everything stays in the proper position. And the 2 bolts for the oxygen sensor wires are back in place, and I'll go ahead and reinstall the radiator hose. Definitely a very easy thermostat to replace. This radiator has a very small mouth and I only have 1 funnel that'll work. I'll use some double-sided tape on the funnel to hold it in place and to form a seal to avoid spilling coolant. Squeezing the upper radiator hose really helps get rid of the air that's trapped in the system. Most of the air is finally out of the system, so I'll go ahead and use the fluid extractor to avoid making a mess. With the radiator cap installed, we're almost finished with the thermostat job. I just need to add some new pre-mixed coolant to the overflow tank. I need to replace the air filter, and while we're at it, let's go ahead and clean the mass airflow sensor. There are a couple of clips and wiring connectors that need to be removed in order to remove the air filter assembly. There are 4 buckles holding down the air filter assembly, and the air filter is ready to come out. The air filter doesn't look too bad, but let's replace it anyway. 2 Phillips head screws hold down the mass airflow sensor. And here are the filaments that need to be cleaned. The sensor uses these filaments to measure the amount of air that's entering the engine. Sometimes cleaning this sensor can help the engine operate more efficiently. If you decide to do this for your vehicle, I highly recommend using mass airflow sensor cleaner instead of using another solvent. And the sensor has had a few minutes to dry. I'll reinstall the sensor and I'll go ahead and clean out the inside of the air box since everything is already opened up. I'll go ahead and reattach the connector to the mass airflow sensor. The 4 buckles are snapped back in place and the air filter and mass airflow sensor job is finished. Let's go ahead and replace the 3rd clutch pressure switch with a new one that's a genuine Honda replacement part. It's easiest to access this sensor from underneath the vehicle. It's located on the driver's side of the vehicle and it's very easy to access. I'll use a pick to release the connector. And the connector is a little bit challenging to remove and the sensor was also pretty tight. There is a washer that we need to reuse with the new sensor. The new sensor is a little bit longer than the old one, but everything else looks the same. I've cleaned up the washer that we have to reuse, so let's go ahead and install the new sensor. And the new sensor threaded in very smoothly and the connector fit nicely as well. The transmission fluid definitely needs to be replaced. Even though that looks like really dark used motor oil, that is indeed transmission fluid. Just draining the fluid does not drain all the fluid in the transmission, since the torque converter holds several quarts of transmission fluid. So I'll have to repeat this process a couple more times after driving the vehicle to freshen up the fluid. The old fluid is on the left and the new fluid is on the right. What a difference! The drain plug has a magnet, and there's a lot of metal on the magnet. Fortunately, I don't see any really large pieces of metal. The drain plug is back in place, so let's go ahead and add close to 3 quarts of transmission fluid. I'll check the transmission fluid once the vehicle is off the jack stands and perfectly level. Let's go ahead and change out the motor oil while we're already under the vehicle. It appears that the oil change place installed a new drain plug that's too long and leaks oil. I purchased a new drain plug that fits properly and should offer a good seal. I've added some lubricant to the new oil filter seal, and the oil filter is ready to be installed. And the oil filter is hand tight, which is perfect. So let's add new oil, and then we'll make sure that we've added enough. I've already started the engine. And the oil level does look good, but I'll need to check it one more time once the vehicle is back on the ground and the vehicle is level. I don't know how many miles of use with the spark plugs, so let's go ahead and change them out with brand new iridiums. A 10mm nut holds down the ignition coils. The connectors need a little squeeze to release them from the coil. The old spark plug took quite a bit of force to break loose, but it's finally out. Other than the spark plug gap being out of spec, the old spark plug actually doesn't look too bad. I'll apply some dielectric grease around the ceramic part of the spark plug, and the spark plugs are ready to be installed. I'll hand tighten the spark plug just to make sure that I don't start them off cross-threaded. I'll use a torque wrench to torque the spark plugs to spec. I'll go ahead and change out the remaining 3 spark plugs, install the coils, and the wiring connectors. And changing out the spark plugs is a very quick and easy process on this vehicle, not always the case on a V6. And the engine sounds pretty good. And the Serpentine belt doesn't look too bad, but it is cracked, so let's replace it. I'll place a wrench on the belt tensioner to release the tension, and the belt is off. The old belt is on the right, and the new belt is on the left. As the Serpentine belt becomes dried and cracked, oftentimes they begin to squeak and make quite a bit of noise. And the new belt is in place. The car battery is just over a year old, but let's check the battery health anyway. A fully charged battery is at 12.6 volts, and this one is close enough for this test. And the battery tester is indicating that this battery is still good, and it's at 619 amps, which is pretty close to a 625 amp rating. SO8 stands for state of health, and the battery is still in pretty good shape at 82%. The state of charge just means that the battery is at 79% charged and below 12.6 volts. In order for this battery to live a full life, the electrolytes need to be maintained at the proper level. And the electrolyte level is pretty low. So let's add some distilled water until the electrolyte level is about half an inch from the top of the vent. Even if your car battery is almost new, I still like the idea of having a portable jump starter in the trunk of the vehicle just in case your vehicle or someone else's needs a boost. It's also a good idea to keep a tire inflator in the car. Replacing the windshield wipers is a quick and easy task. I usually place a towel or sweatshirt under the wiper blade. Once the wiper is removed from the wiper arm, if the arm slams down on the glass, there's a good chance it'll break the windshield. The towel or the sweatshirt will absorb the impact and prevent a broken windshield. These headlights could really benefit from restoration. And the light meter is showing a value of just over 1,100. Let's clean up the headlights and we'll test this once again to measure the improvement. I'll apply some painter's tape to avoid causing damage to the paint finish around the headlights. Restoring headlights can really improve night driving visibility and make a huge difference. The foggy headlights were close to 1,100 and the restored headlight is just over 1,500. That's over 35% increase in light. Very impressive. Let's replace the cabin air filter. The glove compartment is a pretty common place for most vehicles. And the old cabin air filter has done a great job and it's definitely used up. And the new cabin air filter is in place. Reattaching the plastic trim only takes a few minutes. There's just one screw that I need to remove. The front bumper skin just presses and snaps into position and is secured by just one screw. However, I'm replacing the screw with the nut and bolt along with several washers to maintain a much better hold on the bumper skin. And this looks a lot better and shouldn't come loose. And everything went back together nicely on the passenger side of the vehicle as well. And the chrome grille is pretty affordable at around $30 and only takes a few minutes to install. I'll remove the 2 bolts that fasten the front bumper skin to the body of the car. This will allow plenty of space to access the nuts that hold the trim in place. The bumper still has some areas that need painted, but this will definitely improve the appearance of the car. Oftentimes, people get rid of vehicles for small issues that can easily be improved or fixed to perfection with a little effort and expense. And the front trim is back in place and I had to spend an extra $25 for the Honda badge. Cousin Eddie has some very creative ideas, but I better stick with the Honda badge. Let's go ahead and repair the windshield chip using this Permatex repair kit. Clean loose pieces of the glass from the damaged area with the push pin. Clean windshield around the damaged area with the alcohol wipe. Take the adhesive disc and peel the backing off of one side. With tab pointing upward, line up the hole with the disc in the center of the damage. Press the adhesive disc onto the glass. Peel off the other side of the adhesive disc. Line up the pedestal with the adhesive disc, making sure that the tab points upward. Firmly press the pedestal against the disc. Carefully cut off tip to open the resin tube. Place the resin tube 1/4 inch into the pedestal opening and carefully squeeze the tube to load the resin into the pedestal. Carefully and firmly twist the tip of the syringe into the pedestal. Hold the syringe with one hand and gently pull the plunger upward with the other hand. Lock in the plunger at the lowest indent setting. Allow the entire assembly to sit for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, temporarily remove the syringe from the pedestal. With the plunger still locked in the lowest indent setting, carefully replace the syringe by twisting the tip of the syringe into the pedestal. Hold the syringe with one hand and gently push the plunger down with the other hand. Lock in the plunger at the uppermost indent setting, allow to sit for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, remove the syringe. Use a safety razor and slowly remove the pedestal and the adhesive disc from the glass. Wipe off any residual resin from the glass. Hold the resin tube in one hand and the curing strip in the other hand. Carefully squeeze a bead of any remaining resin into the hole of the damaged area. Place curing strip over damaged area to hold in resin. Move into sunlight for 15 minutes or use a UV curing light. I'll go ahead and use a curing light. Use a razor knife to remove any excess resin. That definitely looks a lot better and the windshield crack should not spread. It's a good idea to check the tire pressure on all the wheels, especially the spare tire. This one is pretty low, so I'll go ahead and add some air. The chrome coating has delaminated from the hubcaps. A set of 4 aftermarket hubcaps cost around $50 and they might not be balanced. A set of 4 genuine Honda hubcaps cost over $100, so I'll go ahead and clean these hubcaps up and use some Rust-Oleum 2X to improve the appearance. A fluid extractor comes in very handy for fluid changes, so let's go ahead and build one. I'll use a wide mouth quart jar, a transparent 1/4 inch hose that's at least 4 feet long, and a 3-foot section of scrap air hose. A step bit is the perfect tool for this. Just to be safe, I'll wear some leather gloves and safety glasses. The first hole is sized to offer a snug fit, so let's move on to the second hole and leave around 1 inch space between the holes. The hose end needs to be inside the lid by around 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Let's use some hot glue on the top side of the lid to form a tight seal and to hold the hose in place. I'll go ahead and repeat this process for the inside of the lid. You'll need a vacuum pump and you can pick one up at Harbor Freight for around $100 or on Amazon for well under $100. I'll go ahead and fasten the air hose with the hose clamp to the vacuum pump. In order for this thing to work, the lid on the jar does have to form a seal. And this thing is ready for action. A good quality ceramic coating will help protect the paint finish and it'll improve the vehicle's appearance. I'll go ahead and wash the vehicle with a powerful strip wash to remove anything that's on the paint. Now that the paint is dry, I'll go ahead and apply a ceramic coating that performed very well in a previous episode on ceramic spray coatings. And this 2008 Civic looks a whole lot better and it runs better too. No more clicking sounds when making sharp turns. So the CV joint was definitely the cause of the problem. This vehicle should be highly reliable for many more years to come. I'm definitely not suggesting that a 2008 Honda Civic is the most reliable vehicle. However, some vehicle makes and models are more reliable than others. With that said, a vehicle make and model that has a good reputation can be highly reliable if it receives the proper upkeep. For example, my 2003 Chevrolet Suburban has well over 300,000 miles and over 9,200 hours of use. I keep up on all the maintenance and this vehicle is still highly reliable. This 2000 Buick LeSabre has over 257,000 miles on the original engine and transmission and it's highly reliable. It definitely won't win a beauty pageant, but on a positive note, who's going to want to steal this car? Property taxes, vehicle insurance, and vehicle maintenance are very affordable. In case you're curious, the total cost of all the parts and fluids came in at $823, which is well below the $1,000 goal. If your vehicle has the potential to be highly reliable, it usually makes more sense to keep your used vehicle instead of buying a new car. The average price of a new car in the United States is around $47,000. That car payment would be over $700 per month. Full coverage auto insurance on a new vehicle in Missouri is around $2,500 a year, which works out to around $210 per month. Minimum car insurance coverage on an older used vehicle is around $650 per year or $55 per month. In the state of Missouri, if you own a car, you have to pay personal property taxes based upon the value of the car. For a new car, those personal property taxes will cost around $100 per month. Personal property taxes on a used car is very affordable at just a few dollars. You will spend more time and money on vehicle repairs, but saving over $800 per month adds up to about $10,000 per year. If you're interested, I'll leave a link to a vehicle maintenance checklist in the video description. I have another product review video coming in a week, but if you'd like to see more videos like this one, I'd like to hear your feedback. All the videos in this channel, including this one, are viewer suggested. So if you have a video idea, I hope you'll take time to leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Please take care and look forward to next time.